I stepped onto the path leading to what was left of the old psychiatric clinic, and immediately felt my bones clench in my palms from the cold, even though the sun was shining brightly. This place was called Serra Glen. It was once treated here, but now it just stood there, as if frozen in its mud. I knew the story. The hospital closed in the late 80s after a scandal involving patient escapes and staff disappearances. But everyone said it was gossip. No one wanted to remember. I didn't come here for an adventure. I found an old diary in a bar a week ago. It was brought by some guy who claimed to have found it in the woods outside the city. The pages were covered with handwriting that trembled as if the hand was holding a pen in agony. The notes referred to white coats, rooms where screams are not heard, and that door that cannot be opened. The diary had no dates, but I found out the author's name was Ellen Vale. Her last name came up in the archives. She worked as a nurse in Serra Glen. I came here to find what she didn't have time to tell me. The building looked as if it had been left to be torn apart by time. The roof had caved in places, and the walls were covered with cracks, like skin torn from old age. The door to the main building was boarded up, but I noticed a gap next to a rusty fire escape. Reaching inside, he found a threshold slippery with mold. It smelled musty and sour like an old pharmacy. The walls were once white, but now they are cracked and covered with yellow spots, as if someone painted on them with dirty water. I turned on the flashlight and illuminated the hallway. Empty eye sockets of windows, doors without handles, floor covered with pieces of cracked linoleum. There was a sign at the end of the corridor, Sector B, 7. It's strange because there was no such designation in the Serra Glen archives. I got closer and noticed that the door to this sector was not just closed, it was filled with concrete. Someone obviously wanted to hide what was behind it. My phone started shaking in my pocket, and I remembered that there was no signal. It was strange. Usually there is at least one barrier in forests, but it didn't matter now. I took out my flashlight and moved on until I came across an old map pinned to the wall. It was covered with notes, some of which had been erased, but I could make out the inscription, "Exceptional cases. Access is for staff only." In one of the rooms, I found a cabinet with medical archives. The books were tied with ropes, but the top volumes were lying on the floor. In one of them, dated 1983, I found a list of patients. Many of the names were underlined in red, and next to it was Therapy 3.0. I didn't know what that meant, but at the bottom of the page was a note from Ellen Vale. They don't scream anymore. They are silent, but their eyes. The next thing I saw made me freeze. There were bones on the floor in the corridor leading to Sector B, 7. Not human, too small, but still. These were the remains of some kind of animal which, judging by the tracks, had been dragged through the entire corridor. Blood? No, the footprints were old, almost dried out, but preserved in the cracks of the linoleum. I went into one of the rooms. A medical table with remnants of needles and syringes has been preserved here. There was a sign on the wall, "Injections only after verification." But next to it on the floor, I found a rusty box labeled Sedatives X. I have not found any documents about such drugs on the internet. Then I found a door without a door, just an opening leading into the wall. But behind it, as I understood it, there was a narrow corridor that looked like a tunnel. My flashlight barely penetrated the darkness, but I saw traces of cement on the floor. Someone was clearly trying to fill it up. There was a smell of ammonia inside the tunnel. The walls were covered with something viscous, like a congealed mixture of blood and water. I couldn't figure out what it was, but it looked like footprints from what? From a human. At the end of the tunnel was a metal hatch with the inscription, "Entrance is for those who know only." My flashlight illuminated the rusty levers, and I turned them without hesitation. The hatch opened with a bang, and I saw a ladder leading down. The stairs were narrow, like in a basement, but the lower I went, the colder it got. There were old boxes on the floor with the inscription, "Sector B, 7. It's dangerous." There was a door at the end of the stairs. The glass in it was broken, and I saw behind it a room filled with armchairs with straps. There were old monitors on the walls, similar to those used in cardiology, but with additional wires leading into the walls. There were several folders on the table. I opened one, and there were photographs of patients with captions. Subject 12. Reaction, panic. Subject 3. Resistance, physical. There were notes in another folder. Therapy 3.0. Stress reduction through. The rest was erased. But the scariest thing is Ellen Vale's diary. It was in the desk, open to the last page. Her handwriting became almost illegible. They killed Dr. Kohler. He said it was an experiment, but I saw them inject something into the veins of subject 27. He was screaming. No, he wasn't screaming. He was making sounds that shouldn't exist. Then they pinned it on sepsis. But I know the truth. Sector B, 7 is not a medical wing. This is... I can't write anymore. They're here, they're watching me. If you're reading this, leave. They're not human. They... The diary stopped in the middle of a sentence. I closed my eyes and tried to collect my thoughts. But at that moment, I heard a rustle behind me. I turned around and saw footprints on the floor. Footprints leading from the door down the stairs. Someone was here quite recently. My phone vibrated in my pocket, and I saw that the time was 2:47 a.m. But I came here about 5 hours ago. Where did the time pass? I tried to get out, but the door to the tunnel was locked. I returned to Sector B, 7, and found that all the doors had disappeared. Instead, there were walls now. I was trapped. Then I started looking for a way out, but the corridors began to change. What was on the right was now on the left. The card in my hands didn't match what I saw. I'm confused, like in a maze where the walls breathe. At some point, I came across a door with a voice behind it. Male horse. You should have left when you could. I didn't answer. I broke out in a cold sweat. They're still here, the voice continued. Did you find Ellen's diary? She tried to warn me, but they don't leave any witnesses. I opened the door and saw an old man in a dirty bathrobe. He was sitting on the floor, hugging his knees. His face was scratched, and his eyes, they were empty, as if the iris had been taken out of them. You're the one who knows, he whispered. Now they will come for you. Who? I asked, but he wasn't listening anymore. He was looking at something behind my back. I turned around abruptly and froze. A woman in a white coat was standing at the end of the corridor. Her face was calm, but her eyes, they were as green as the operating room lamp. She was smiling. Welcome to Serra Glen, she said. You're our new patient. I ran, but she wasn't following me. She just stood there and watched. And I ran until I came across the very door to Sector B, 7, which was filled with concrete. Now it was open. I stepped inside, and the door closed behind me. Inside, it was dark inside. I couldn't turn on the flashlight. And then I heard something move behind me. But I couldn't turn around, because my shoulders, they're stuck in the chair. The same chair as in the folder with the subjects. And I was already handcuffed. And somewhere in the distance, a sound like the ticking of a clock was heard. Only it wasn't a tick. It was breathing. The breath of the one who looked at me in the dark. They don't leave any witnesses. I know that now. But why do I feel like something cold and slippery is touching my hand? And why doesn't it stop? And why can't I scream? My fingers dug convulsively into the armrests. The leather of the chair was as rough as a rag, but underneath it, I felt something metallic rusty pins screwed into the wood. I jerked my hands, but the handcuffs wouldn't budge. My head was spinning, and there was a lump in my throat, as if I couldn't breathe anymore. What was touching my arm slid lower. It was a finger, cold, pale, almost transparent, like a man who hasn't seen the sun in months. His finger slid across his wrist and froze. I forced myself not to look down, but out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that he was trembling. You got the wrong door, a voice said from the darkness. It was feminine, but too low, as if the speaker had swallowed a stone. Sector B, 7 is not for people like you. I tried to speak, but my throat was tight. Suddenly the lights came on. It was yellow like in the old hospital corridors and lit up the whole room. There were 5 similar chairs, but they were all empty. Devices with dials and wires leading to the ceiling hung on the walls. A woman in a white coat was standing at a table with tools. Her face was motionless, but her eyes, the same green as the lamp, stared straight at me. You thought you were looking for secrets. She picked up a syringe and shook the bubbles out of the liquid. No, you found what we've been hiding, and now you will be hidden too. I started kicking the floor, but she took a step forward, and I froze. In her hand was not a syringe, but a key. She came closer, and I saw that her robe was stained with something dark. It looked like blood, but too pale, almost bluish. This is not an experiment, she whispered. This is treatment. You know too much, and now your memory will be the same as theirs. She pointed to the door. Behind her, in the hallway, I noticed silhouettes. Lots of people in white coats standing along the walls. Their heads were motionless like mannequins, but their faces were blank, expressionless. She opened her desk drawer and took out a piece of paper. It was Ellen Vale's diary, the one I found in the bar. Did you think it was an accident? She flipped to the page where Ellen had written about Dr. Kohler. No, you found him because we wanted you to come here. I suddenly realized that I hadn't been walking by accident all this time. Someone planted a diary for me. Maybe even that old man in the hallway. He was part of it too. The woman came to the chair and stood right in front of me. Her wrist touched mine, and I felt a chill run through my skin, as if she were soaked through. Do you think we killed patients? She laughed, but it sounded like the creak of iron. No, we were freeing them from pain. Their memory is an ulcer. We're just cleaning it up. She paused, and I heard sounds from the hallway. Footsteps. There were a lot of footsteps, but they were too quiet, as if people were barefoot. They'll be here soon, she said, and you'll be ready. I jerked, but the handcuffs dug into my wrists. In the corner of my eye, I noticed something touching my hand again. It was a man, his finger sliding across the metal. He was thin, with long, tentacle-like fingers. His skin glistened like a corpse in water. Who are you? I asked. The woman leaned closer. Her breath smelled of iodine and rust. We're the ones who stay, she whispered. After the hospital closed, we stayed here. Because this is our home. And now it will be yours too. She opened a drawer and took out an injection. The glass of the syringe was cloudy, and the liquid inside glowed green, like water in a swamp. It's not a sedative, she said. This is erasure. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were several passports on the table behind her. One of them was mine. Have you been following me? I croaked. She smiled. We always keep an eye on those who come here. I started to scream, but all that came out of my throat was a wheeze. The woman injected me with the drug. It burned like fire, but it wasn't pain that spread through his body, but emptiness. I could feel my thoughts flying out of my head, like letters being burned in an oven. The liquid in the syringe began to spread through my veins, and I felt my body go limp. Not from a pain, but from some strange warmth that seemed to dissolve the bones. Thoughts flew out one after another, names, faces, events. I couldn't grasp them like sand through my fingers. The woman was watching me with her hands clasped behind her back. Her eyes glowed like two green lights in the dark. You'll be just like them, she said, nodding toward the hallway. You won't feel fear anymore. Pain. Sadness. I tried to remember why I came here. Why was I looking for Ellen's diary? But the memory dissolved like salt in water. My name is... I began, but the name slipped my mind. You're Subject 38, she replied, as if it were important. And you're going to be part of the family soon. Suddenly, the room became darker. The light flickered and went out. I heard footsteps, many footsteps approaching from a hallway. They were quiet, but I could feel them like vibrations in the floor. They've come, the woman whispered. Are you ready? I tried to scream, but my throat was constricted. My body wasn't listening anymore. I could feel something warm dripping onto my palm. Blood? No, it was sweat, but it smelled like chemistry, like in a lab. The door swung open. There were people in the hallway. There were a lot of people in white coats, but their faces, they were pale like wax masks. The eyes are empty, like those of mannequins. They walked in time, as if they were suspended on strings. Welcome to Serra Glen, one of them whispered, and his voice sounded like an echo from the depths of a well. They surrounded me, leaning forward. Their breath smelled of rust and medicines. I tried to turn away, but my head wouldn't turn. The woman stood next to him. Her hand touched my shoulder. "You're one of us now," she said. "You'll forget everything, and you'll be happy." I felt something heavy fall on my chest. It was Ellen's diary. "You have to," I tried to say, but the words stuck. They closed around me, their hands touching my face, my hair, my clothes. Their touch was as cold as the hands of the dead. "We knew you'd come," one of them whispered. "We've been waiting." And then I remembered. All. Ellen Vale, Dr. Kohler, Subject 27, who was making incredible noises. It wasn't an experiment. It was... They didn't kill them, I whispered. They turned them into this. The woman in white froze. "Do you still remember?" Her voice cracked. I nodded, and at that moment I realized that an injection does not erase memory instantly. She does it gradually, and I can still do something. You're not human," I whispered. "You are what they did to you." They froze. "You're wrong," the woman said. "We are the future." But I've already struggled with the straps. My body started to obey. I jerked my hand, and the handcuff flew off with a clang. "You won't win," she said, but there was desperation in her voice. I stood up, and they staggered back. Panic flashed in their eyes. "You made a mistake," I said, clutching the diary in my hand. "I'm not staying here." They rushed at me. Their hands clung to their clothes, to their hair. One of them bit into my hand. I screamed, but it wasn't a cry of fear. It was a cry of rage. I ran to the door, but it was locked. Then I punched the wall. She wasn't as strong as she looked. There were only old boards inside. "Run!" I shouted, breaking through the passage. They rushed after me. I ran out into the hallway, but the walls kept changing. Where to run to? Suddenly, I heard the old man's voice from the previous room. "The tunnel." "Stop it," he shouted. "Follow the tunnel." I rushed back through the same corridors where there were traces of animal blood, where the walls were covered with a viscous mixture. They were chasing me, their footsteps getting louder. I ducked into the tunnel, but there was a trap waiting for me below. A woman in white stood at the entrance to the basement. "You're not coming out," she said. "You'll be here like everyone else." "You've all made a mistake," I whispered. "You thought that forgetting was salvation. But this is hell." She took a step forward, but I was already running down the stairs. It was dark in the basement, but I knew there was a way out. It was behind the old door that I saw in the folder with the subjects. I opened it and ran inside, and froze. It was a room with dozens of chairs. There were straps on each one. That IT was a room with dozens of chairs. There were straps on each one. I froze in the doorway, feeling my feet dig into the old linoleum. The room was the same as the one where I woke up in handcuffs. Only now the chairs were occupied. People. They sat motionless, their heads bowed forward. But when I took a step, they turned their faces in my direction. Their eyes, empty like those of those who stood in the corridor, silently watched me. "You came to us," one of them whispered. His voice was like the sound of an old radio. The woman in white followed me in. Her footsteps echoed loudly in the void. "Do you see them?" "What is it?" she asked. "They're part of the family, and you will become a part of it." I backed away, but the door slammed shut behind me. "You're not human," I repeated. "You're a zombie. You turned them into this." She laughed, but turned into a wheeze. "It's not a transformation. It's a relief." One of the patients in the chair raised his hand. His fingers were long, like those of the one who touched me in Sector B7. "We don't feel pain," he said. "We are not afraid." I looked at my hands. There were still scratches on his wrist from the handcuffs, but I felt them faintly. The injection worked. My emotions melted like ice under the sun. "You can't win," the woman said. "You're almost one of us now." I remembered Ellen's diary, which was lying on my chest. "You killed her," I whispered. "You killed everyone." "We don't kill," she replied. "We are releasing." She took a step forward, and I felt my muscles relax. I didn't want to run anymore. "You'll understand soon enough," she said. "This is salvation." But I still remembered. "That's not all. You're sick," I said. "You don't know what you're doing." She stopped. "We know," she whispered. "We know better than you do." One of the patients stood up. His movements were slow, like a man who hadn't stood up in years. "He has to stay with us," he said. "He has to forget." I tried to run to the door, but it was locked. Then I rushed to the cabinet in the corner, the one where I found the passports. "You're not coming out," the woman shouted. I opened the closet. There were dozens of folders with photos inside. Subjects 1, 2, 3, and my picture. "You're subject 38, she said. "You're already number 1 on our list." I grabbed the folder and saw the date, today. They were waiting for me. "You've been following me all my life," I whispered. "We're watching everyone," she replied. "Those who come here, they are not random." I rushed to the window, but there was a wall behind it. It was a trap. "You can't escape," she said. "You're already here." They began to approach. Their footsteps were quiet, but I could feel their breath, cold as death. I grabbed a chair and threw it at the woman. She flew back, but immediately stood up as if she hadn't felt the impact. "You don't understand," she said. "This is the end of your pain." They surrounded me. Their hands touched my shoulders, my back, my face. "Resistance is useless," one of them whispered. "You'll be the same." I punched him. He fell, but immediately rose like a doll on strings. "You're not human," I said. "We're all that's left of humans," the woman replied. "And you will become the same." They rushed at me. Their hands clung to their clothes, to their hair. I tried to fight, but my movements were getting slower. "This is the end," the woman whispered, squeezing my hand. "You won't feel anymore." I heard Ellen's voice from the diary. "They're not human. They..." But I no longer remembered what she wanted to say. My thoughts dissolved like salt in water. I saw them tying me to a chair. Their movements were as precise as those of robots. The woman injected me with a second dose. "You'll be the same now," she said. "You'll be happy." I felt my memory slipping away. I didn't remember why I came here. I couldn't remember my mother's name. He didn't remember who I was. And in the end, I wasn't afraid. It was weird. It's like someone turned off the light in my head. I watched them go, and I didn't feel anything. Nothing, but the liquid in the syringe began to spread through the veins. My thoughts flowed like sand through my fingers. "You won't feel anymore," the woman whispered. "Pain, fear, regret." One of the patients in the chair reached out to me. His skin glistened like wax, and his fingers were long and thin. "You'll be the same," he whispered. "It's easy." I tried to scream, but my throat was constricted. My body went limp, and a strange melody started playing in my head, as if someone was turning on an old gramophone. "Do you remember your mother's name?" "What is it?" the woman asked. I shook my head. "Your job." "Friends." I couldn't remember anything. Only just a sense of peace. Finally, they tied me to a chair. Their movements were as precise as robots. "You'll be happy," she said. I looked in the mirror above the table. My reflection was slowly changing. His skin turned pale, and his eyes lost color. I became like them, empty, lifeless, but calm. "This is the end," I whispered. "No," the woman replied. "This is the beginning." They gave me another dose. My thoughts completely melted away, and I understood. Serra Glen is not a hospital. It's a trap, a place where you choose to remain human in hell or become a shadow in heaven. I wasn't fighting anymore. I became one of them. One of those who sits in a chair, waits for new patients, and whispers, "Welcome home." But sometimes at night, when I hear screams outside the walls, I remember that it wasn't screams. These are the voices of those who cannot forget, who is still running through the corridors, trying to find a way out. And I'm sitting here in an armchair, and I'm smiling, because memory is pain. And the pain is the end. And I don't want to feel the end anymore. The final. I woke up outside in the bright sun. Next to it is my backpack, my phone, which is working. Serra Glen stood in the distance, but now it was just an abandoned house. No one knew what was going on there. I took Ellen's diary out of my pocket. The pages were clean. I couldn't remember what it said. But sometimes when I feel anxious, I call psychiatric clinic and ask, "Are there any vacancies for subject 38?" And I always get an answer. "Welcome home." Now I know Serra Glen is not the place. It's a condition,